I'm going to be bold in my approach because, as my Geordie mother says, shy Ben's getting out. So you have to
translate that for some of us who don't know what that means.
Shy children don't get anything.
Ah, very interesting.
So if you want something, then you have to really reach out and try and grab it.
Welcome to the Lush Life Podcast. I'm your drinking companion, Susan Schwartz, and I bring you the how-to guide for living life one cocktail at a time. Thanks to my mother's love of martinis, the first words I spoke were shaken, not stirred, and I've been obsessed by cocktails ever since. Together, we'll learn from bartenders, brand ambassadors, distillers, and others why certain drinks are popular in certain cultures, how to make the perfect old-fashioned, when to shake and when to stir, and so much more. Hear that sound? It's time to cozy up to the bar and let the fun begin. It might seem like a long stretch to go from lawyer to co-lead brewer at Truman's Brewery, one of the most iconic of British brands. But not if you listen to the advice of our guest's mother. Charlotte Cook wasn't shy, and she grabbed what she could. It literally took one sip of IPA to get her to change her career from would-be lawyer to would-be brewer. But let her tell you how.
I grew up in Newcastle upon Tyne, well, just outside of Newcastle upon Tyne, but I've spent the past 10 years in Scotland, so that's why I have a slightly weird accent.
Yes, it's not your typical Geordie accent.
No, it's not particularly that Biker Grove. I guess it's a slightly posh Geordie accent with a bit of Scottish chopped in there as well.
And I see that you went to university, you did a law degree.
Yes, I did.
At the University of Edinburgh.
Yes.
So did you always want to be a lawyer?
I think I always wanted to be rich, which was probably...
I love your honesty.
Which is probably what drove me to do law. And also I can be quite argumentative. You know, I'd fight my way out of a paper bag if I could argue with it.
Did you win those arguments?
Not always.
That's why you wanted to go to law school, to figure out a way to win.
To learn how to argue. Yeah, you spend 4 years getting taught how to win arguments.
And how's your argument skill? How are the argument skills now?
I'd say I'm a bit more diplomatic than I was when I was at law school, perhaps.
So you were doing this law degree. And, but obviously we're here at Truman Brewery.
Yeah.
So that didn't go as planned.
Yeah, it's a bit of a leap, isn't it?
Yeah.
But,
were you drinking a lot of beer and then thinking, oh, maybe I like this better than law?
Yeah, it was kind of, it was about 2009, 2010 when craft beer was really, really starting to take off. And especially in Scotland when Brewdog were really sort of crashing into the scene, and everyone in Edinburgh was kind of, oh, let's go and try this new beer that tastes completely different to all the other beers that we've got. And I think it was from the first sip of hardcore IPA that I had, I just thought, I want to make this. I want somebody to teach me how to make this, and this is what I want to do. Prior to that, I used to drink cider, and I didn't even like beer until I was about 20. And by the time I was 22, I was a professional brewer, so it was quite a leap.
So do you think it was that there was something new that you wanted to try? Because you said you didn't really drink beer.
Yeah.
So why do you think you even took that first sip?
I think it was just because, it was something new, and I didn't expect to like it. And I thought, this is going to be the same as all the other beer that I dislike. I didn't really like the bitterness. I was much more into sweet things. And I think it was also probably around about the age where your palate changes naturally, where things become a little bit more refined. You have slightly more adult tastes than you did when you were younger. And so I kind of slowly went off cider and turned on to beer. But I think that I probably wouldn't have done it if it hadn't have been for the more interesting craft beers that were out there.
So they did a great job in advertising or marketing to youth or the Edinburgh crowd.
Yeah, I think kind of a 20-year-old.
For you, a non-beer drinker, to try it and then go one step further to say, I want to learn how to make this.
Yeah, it was a big step and a big change, and definitely not really what I was expecting to be doing.
Did you think, I mean, was it really that, that flash of lightning that struck that minute you took a sip? Because you were pretty ingrained in a law degree.
I think it was. I think by that point I knew that I probably didn't want to be a lawyer, but I was still sort of entertaining the thought of doing graduate schemes and kind of continuing with law. And I think I had that taste, and it was just a flash of lightning. It's like, this is so much better than everything else that I've ever done in my life, and this is what I want to do. And so I decided that I would do it.
So how does one do that?
Well, I was quite lucky.
How did you do that?
So I think that I got in at precisely the right moment. I was very lucky in that it was 2011, I think, when I started. And it was when, people were starting to get a bit more interested in actually pursuing this as a career. Now the job market's much more competitive than it was then. But Brewdog were advertising for entry-level staff at their brewery up in Fraserburgh. And I thought I'd just give it a go. So I sent my CV. I think I swore quite a lot in my CV, in my cover letter.
You actually wrote down swear words?
Yeah, I think I said that I was so impressed by Brewdog and I wanted to work there because it had brought beer away from the real ill and made it cool again.
We may have to beep that out, by the way. But that's
sorry. But it's, I thought, it's a bold company. I'm going to be bold in my approach. Because as my Geordie mother says, shy Ben's getting out. So you have to
translate that for some of us who don't know what that means.
Shy children don't get anything.
Ah, very interesting.
So if you want something, then you have to really reach out and try and grab it.
Was your family pretty supportive of this?
Yeah, they were very supportive. I mean, my parents both worked in the NHS and have always said the most important thing in your job is to be happy. And so they were very supportive. That it was something that I wanted to do. So I was clearly really driven to do and passionate by. And they've been supportive all along. I mean, they've put me through a master's degree. They've sent me to Yakima to go to the hop harvest, when I didn't have enough money to pay for a flight to Seattle. So they've been very supportive and very helpful. And without them, I probably wouldn't be in the position that I am now. So
I'm only asking that because my parents still to this day say, "Are you sure you don't want to go to law school?" That's why.
No, the drinks industry is much better.
So Brewdog saw that word and said, "We have to hire this girl." Right?
Maybe it was a pretty intense interview actually. At that time, you would go up to the brewery in Fraserburgh for a week, and it was, I think, the first week of January, and. Right. For anyone who hasn't been to the northeast coast of Scotland, it's cold, it's windy. Fraserburgh has its charms, but it's never going to be people's number one tourist destination in Scotland, I think it's fair to say. So, I arrived at this industrial estate in the dark at 8 o'clock in the morning in a place that I'd never been to before. There's steam rolling out the door and heavy metal blasting. I just kind of walked in, two heavily bearded guys looking very intensely at something, and kind of little me wandering in thinking, oh gosh, is this really the place?
And this is just the interview, right?
This was the first day. So I went there for a week, did 7 days on the trot, working in the brewery, just cleaning, doing the things that keep the brewery running, but are, simple enough for somebody who doesn't know much about brewing and beer to do. It was hard work. I mean, by the end of it, I could barely walk.
I'm sure just to lift a barrel is tough.
Yeah, they're pretty heavy. 30 litres, 50 litres.
Yeah, especially if it's full, right?
Yeah. They're heavy things, and malt sacks are 25 kilos. But with that, I just worked out my techniques. What worked for the big, burly guys didn't work for me. But if I kind of, adjusted my technique, I could do it. So, but yeah, I just loved it. It was kind of, I think, it was one of those things where I thought if I didn't get this job, then I'd be absolutely just broken and shattered. And, it was what I wanted to do so much. And yeah, they gave me the job and I learned a huge amount there. It was a really, really excellent place to learn. The head brewer at the time was a guy called Stuart Bowman, who to this day I think is one of the most affable and wonderful people that I've ever met. And he was always very, very happy to share his knowledge, would always be very patient with you and explain precisely why something needed to be done and make sure that you understood it. I think, it was the most fantastic head brewer. And, I can only hope to be half as good as he was. But, I learned a lot there. I learned how to brew well and how to keep standards high. Because I think, a lot of criticism can be leveled at Brewdog for various things. But I think that they are completely dedicated to making excellent beer. And I think kind of, Martin Dickey's focus is certainly on quality and making sure that everything that leaves the brewery is done to the best that they can do.
Well, I guess, anyone, especially, you coming from Edinburgh, being new there and living in this place that there's nothing around it really.
No.
That you have already shown a dedication to wanting to learn.
Yeah.
You are there. And I guess you were there for about 3 years, right?
Yeah,
like
it was 3 years.
That you give up a lot being a young person. It's not like you're in the center of Edinburgh having a good time. I can't even imagine what the social life is. I mean, it's all kind of inbred there, that you have to have a passion already going into the job, to even the application process. And that they see that and they see the willingness. Otherwise, you probably don't last 2 minutes there.
Yeah, I think that maybe in the early days did have a bit of difficulty with staff retention, but like you said, it's just very remote. It's far from home for a lot of people. It's cold and dark and damp, and unless this is absolutely what you want to do, it's not the place for the faint-hearted.
So you were a perfect sponge, really. You
I think
took
so.
everything in and I loved every bit of it.
Yeah, I just wanted to know everything. I wanted to be involved with everything and just do everything. I was probably quite greedy and trying to get taught things, and would try and always sneak in and find out what other people were doing and try and wheedle my way into taste panels so I could learn about beer tasting and things like that. So,
well, how long do you think it took you? I guess I know you were there 3 years, but how long do you feel when there was that other lightning bolt that said, "Wait a sec, I know this. I got it.
Yeah,
I can move on."
I think I probably realized that I could do it after about a year and a bit. So we did an all-female brew day at the original Fraserburgh Brewery, whilst the new Ellen Brewery was up and running. So I think about 12 of us went up there and made a beer. We made a Thai spiced IPA. It was really nice. But that was, I felt a lot of pressure because it's like, I'm making this beer, Brewdog are putting their name to it, so it better be good.
I don't think they would have let you do it if they didn't trust you, probably.
Yeah, I would hope so. And, Martin helped me with the recipe. James gave his support to do it. The Fraserburgh Herald came down and did an article about it, so that was quite cool. I think when that went out, and kind of the day after the beer launch, when I was sitting reading the beer reviews on the internet the next day, it was like, wow, I've made this. This is something that's come out of my brain, and people have sat and then taken the time to write what they think about it, and people have actually liked this. It's like, I actually know what I'm doing.
Well, I guess the technicalities of brew making or beer making, anyone can learn. But the tongue is probably something that just can't be taught. You have to either have that or not.
Yeah, and I think a palate for creation is something that not everybody has. So there's some really excellent brewers who aren't particularly great recipe designers, and some really great recipe designers who might sort of not be the best in the brew house.
You got to find a combination if you don't have it yourself. Yeah. But you seem to have it.
Well, I hope so.
So was it difficult to leave there and go to your next venture?
Well, actually, when I left Brewdog, I'd recently been diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. So I wasn't very well when I left Brewdog, and it was more sort of I just needed to go home and stay at my parents' house for a little while. Actually, it was just before Christmas when I left, and kind of for most of the January I couldn't walk because my feet had swelled up so much, and I was really not in a very good place. So it was more of a necessity. I got ill and could no longer really do it. And actually, I just needed a little bit of TLC at home.
Did you think ever that you wouldn't be able to go back to doing what you wanted?
I did for a bit. I actually, during that time, I thought about going and doing a law master's at one of the universities in Aberdeen part-time, just something to kind of keep myself ticking over. But, not long after that kind of particularly dark January, the medication that I was on started to work and, life sort of slowly got its colour back somewhat. So it wasn't... So, yeah, I think for a while I didn't want to do it, but I sort of persevered, and I'm really glad that I did. I think that my life's definitely better doing what I do now than if I'd gone back to do law.
Well, yeah, gosh, we wouldn't have the Truman Brewery we have now, but we're going to get to that. But you then went on somewhere else.
Yeah, so...
Did you again put out your CV with a cover letter?
No.
With the naughty word in it?
Not that time. I went to work at Pohjola in Tallinn, but I'd previously worked with their head brewer in Brewdog, so they needed some help. So I went over and gave them a hand.
And what was it like living there?
I really loved it. It's a really, really beautiful place. Estonia, I don't think, is on too many people's sort of list of places that they visit. But I tell everyone, if they're asking where to go for a long weekend, it's go to Tallinn. It's beautiful. There's, nature, there's city. The people are really nice. There's good food, good beer.
Well, I don't think Estonian beer is really on most people's
list
I
don't think
to drink.
So. No, and
how was it when you got there and kind of when you left?
It was definitely growing when I left. I know that there was some difficulties with the taxation system that the government was putting in place, and that was definitely driven by the big breweries in Estonia, so Saku and Alakok and breweries like that, who by that point, Estonia is a small country and Pohjola were doing very well. So I think they were, by that point, the fourth biggest brewery in Estonia and might have come under a tax bracket that could have potentially, caused a lot of difficulties for them and for all the other smaller breweries as well. So I think there was a little bit of nervousness about how that was going to go. But in terms of the beer actually being produced, there's loads of really great breweries. I mean, Pohjola, I think most people who know what they do know that they do it very well. They're definitely one of the most exciting breweries in Europe. The team there work really hard to make really great beer. But there's other ones as well. There's Puhesta Brewery as well. There's Sorry Brewery, whose beer's fine. It's there's a lot of people who are doing a lot of good work out there.
But then Truman came calling.
So I'd never lived in London before, and James, our managing director, approached me. I think that Trumans has been very well known as producing really good quality, consistent cask ales, and really kind of putting out the traditional beers. But I think with the market being as it is, and especially in London, you need to have that little kind of fresh edge too. So Trumans came calling and said, do you want to help us sort of revamp all of our brewing and beer styles? And I said yes, and came along. So there's two lead brewers here. There's myself and James Rabaliati. And, we basically just kind of ripped up the recipe book, changed the water profiles for everything, made everything a little bit more modern, a little bit fresher, a little bit kind of crisper, a little bit more daring. And, we just worked really hard for 6 months to kind of crack the beer. And, the sales have increased, and people say Trumans is really consistent. I see it everywhere. Whenever I have a pint of your roller, it always tastes great, which is, as the brewer, precisely what you want to hear.
Truman, obviously people, they probably think that Trumans has existed since the 1600s because it is such a big name recognition, especially in London, because of the old Truman Brewery being still a place that you can go in Brick Lane. And so even I, before doing research, thought, oh my gosh, that's the same one that's been around. I'm going to go visit her on Brick Lane. Oh, well, no, that closed down.
Yeah.
And, but in my research, it was always known, Benjamin Truman made it famous because of it very dark style of beer making. Please tell me if I've got this wrong.
Oh, no, you're correct.
And then I guess that kind of grew out of fashion. And at one time it was the biggest brewery pretty much in the world, because England was one of the biggest countries in the world and most powerful. And then unfortunately it disappeared, and then it came back.
Yeah.
Now, when it came back, did they use those or try and find or do research for those original kind of ale-y types first? And that's why they brought you in for the new ones?
Yeah, I'd say so. So we're really lucky in that we have access to loads of the old recipes from Trumans. So when the name was bought, some of the kind of the intellectual property came along with it. So the first brews that we did were done contract brewing, and they were based upon original recipes. And, you know, they were very sort of traditional, like a running ale and a best bitter and a golden ale. So, you know, very traditional cask beers. And they were brewed off-site by another brewery for a few years until the site here was opened in 2013. And the very first beer that we brewed here was London Keeper, which is an original 1880s recipe, which is delicious, an export stout at 8%, so it's quite a hefty beer. So, yeah, there'd been a lot of the traditional brews going forward, and you know, I think it had always been well regarded as a traditional brewer, but there's a lot more that we can do than just, you know, the traditional cask beers. We've got a really young creative team here, so there's a lot of interesting things going out.
When you got here, did you have to start making new recipes yourself? I mean, is that something that you do?
Yeah. So we did that pretty much straight away. So tasted some of the beers.
And this is the two of you?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we tasted the beers and decided what we liked, what we didn't like, and then decided what we wanted to do and where we wanted it to go. So we kind of looked at everything that was in can and everything that was in keg, and it was all fine, but there was a lot of sort of room for improvement. And, you know, if you put in a little bit of effort to make things taste better, and if you invest a little bit of money, then you can sort of multiply the flavor 1,000 times. So yeah, we just kind of tweaked. We changed the order in which hops were being added, so we would add them later, so you get more aromatics and less bitterness. So we were trying to utilize things to the most effective way that we could.
Now, I have a question, because I'm sitting here at Truman Brewery surrounded by cans. That's fine. I always think of drinking a beer, you know, pouring it into a glass from a bottle. But obviously a lot of people drink, you know, if everyone is going to drink one of these cans, a lot of people are drinking cans of beer. Is there a difference between making a beer in a can and making a beer for a bottle? Because to me, it tastes really different.
I think that, you know, when we put things into cans and bottles, we treat them exactly the same. So they'll be carbonated, quite often they'll be filtered, or we'll add Super F, which is a vegan fining agent, which will just make it a little bit clearer. So we'll make it fizzier, we'll try and make it clearer. But you know, we treat it in exactly the same way. I think that it's a psychological perception that changes it. So when you have it from a can, it's you have a totally different experience than when you have it from a bottle. And I think that kind of, you know, it does taste different as well, just because of, you know, the heat from your hands, sort of the way that you hold it, like the length of time that it takes to get to your mouth, things like that. It all has an impact.
It's because I don't have too many brewers come on my show. It's usually spirits, and that comes out of a bottle. Now, I met you first in the Truman Arms, the new pub in London.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
So the Newman Arms has been a pub since, I think it's been a pub on that site since 1700s. And I think it's got quite a nefarious past as well. It was, you know, a famous pub for a long time, and it sat empty for quite a long time. So, you know, Truman saw that there was this, you know, legendary pub sitting empty in Fitzrovia, and, you know, we needed a tap room, we needed an outlet for our beer, so it just seemed like the perfect combination. It's another London institution, so it's quite nice to be able to combine the two.
Well, all this talk about beer has gotten me thirsty. So should we go have some?
I think that's a good idea.
I want to thank Charlotte for taking the time to meet me at the brewery itself. If you're in London, head to the Truman Arms and sip every style of their beer you can. So you have an idea what might be on tap, I'm forgoing our usual cocktail of the week to give you a guided tour through a few of Truman's special beers. Truman's Brewery has been around since 1666, and thankfully, a few of the old recipes were discovered. The first is called London Keeper, a dark and wintry stout based on a Truman's recipe from 1880. Beer writer Pete Brown describes it best: a silky, chocolatey, vinous essential. Look out for it. Put it on your present wish list. In fact, mug, steal, or blackmail to get it if you must. Then we fast forward to a recipe from 1916. This time, it's a barley wine, made from traditional English hops alongside a malt base. Red fruits can be tasted, thus the wine factor. Runner was traditionally the name of a brewery's easy drinking session beer, available to everyone, everywhere. Truman's Brewery Runner is their interpretation of this, and it's super easy to drink. Now the award-winning beer. To celebrate the reopening of Truman's Brewery, they created Lazarus, a pale gold refreshing beer which has gone on to win tons of awards. Check out their website for all the other beers you can find, or you'll find a selection of these beers in our shop. Back to spirits next week with a little dram of whiskey, more specifically, Chivas Regal. So you want to be a brand ambassador? Well, it's not easy, as our next guest found out when he applied to the Chivas Brand Ambassador program. You'll discover what they put him through. Until next time, bottoms up. Thanks for listening to the Lush Life Podcast, the sister of A Lush Life Manual. For more information and links to everything you heard, plus a bit more, please visit alushlifemanual.com. Always remember the wise words of Oscar Wilde. All things in moderation, including moderation. And always drink responsibly. Okay, I said that last part. Theme music is by Steven Shapiro and used with permission. Lush Life is produced by Evo Terra, and I'm your hostess, Susan Schwartz. I'll see you at the bar.